episode 12 of the Ganzfeld Files. So, what you're about to hear is my guest Samu going into the Ganzfeld experiment for 1 hour. So, you will hear that audio. It will be cut for a time because there's gaps in between, but you will hear his full session, and then right after that, we're going to do a debrief on the show. So, here it is.
All right.
Okay, here we go, Samu.
Into the abyss. It seems that I have been passing through a very dense fog, and I have the sensation, perhaps, of moving between pillars or naked trees, indeed, it's moving down from what seems to have been a large remove, great distance, and periodically to a much larger downward moving, blanketing darkness on the right side that almost feels as though it's like a vast hand kind of leading or stroking the side of my eye, kind of pulling it downwards, guiding it downwards, better to say. And after that, for a time, there was an almost inversion of color and seemed to be this very springy matrix of dark blue with small bubbles of orange and red in the center. And then through that was the quite clear, forceful and powerfully framed, if not entirely distinct, sensation of some kind of head, no sense of a body, facing to the left, the opposite way from which that caressing darkness was witnessed, and it is present and then turns to the left, gazing in this direction, kind of pulsing a bit. Hard to say whether it appears more human or leonine or some other kind of primate, if not human. And then it vanished. It was only after that that I began to say anything at all. Now I feel more static, not as though I am moving. Perhaps having arrived on the inside of some space, viewing chamber, or almost like looking out of a window from inside of a building that I may have been outside before. Looking down again, like the passage of a tempestuous river, passing in the opposite direction, looking, or flowing rather, away from the direction the face was gazing towards. Now it feels as though it's quite suddenly gone, and in its place maybe a dried sand or riverbed. desiccated. Trying to make sense of this now. It's an offset, angled, tapering rectangle, dark at the top, but becoming pulsing and indistinct towards the bottom, and it returns and then vanishes, and each time it returns there's this growing half moons or like domes that sprout out from below, like some geometrically regular, not exactly a mushroom cloud, but it has a sense of growing spore-like from the base of this pillar, but that too itself disappears from the base up and then seems to fly or flap or float away, almost like an umbrella being carried by the wind, or a large jellyfish flapping itself up and to somewhere that I can't see far above, perhaps rising from the seabed where these growing shapes at the bottom have been deployed. All quite difficult to make out, though. After that, I rather suddenly became more aware of a discomforting sensation in my left shoulder, and raised that left arm, and almost immediately what had been nothing started to take new shapes and colors, shapes more, that multifaceted, pulsing kind of ground floor merged towards some kind of centralized mass, almost like a broader, more insistent version of what had perhaps planted it there, and started to move upwards slowly in waves, taking over my vision from the bottom to the top, and then lifting, and again almost seeming to flap or push itself away, up and out of sight. Now very fleeting, repeated impressions somewhat in the center of this field of view that seem to indicate or be the last glimpse of the tail of something that is just disappearing from out of sight down into some open space. It seems to be very large. Difficult to gauge the scale, but impressions are of it being quite vast, and observing this from far away. The face is back, and it seems that that which I thought and could still have been that tail disappearing was now also the top of the spine leading to the atlas and the base of the skull of this form, which is still in the same perspective, gazing to the left at first and seeing the darker outline of that spinal column, and slowly turning to face and then disappearing. It seemed for a moment that perhaps the image was trying to draw a number. Looks like either a 1 or 7. It's gone. There was nothing for some time, but I'm now trying to... It's almost as if that face is back and not turning anymore from a sidewards gaze, but rather facing directly. Yet, as I look around from one static point here, it's as if I'm able to roll the face side to side with a hand, as if I were holding it by the chin, and almost as if it's waiting to something to be recognized, not making any visible expression. It almost seems to be, in fact, two faces that might at times merge into one, each the same and conjoined just behind the ear, and then rotating into sameness or peeling apart depending on how I look or tilt my own head. Now, something reminiscent of that spinal column, that disappearing tail, that 1 or the 7 is back, watching something from the side, facing the same direction that the initial face was gazing towards. But this, although it's very blurry, it seems to be in constant repetition a figure bipedal, moving from a position on the ground, crouched or bent over, hands and knees, seen from the side, slowly standing and bending, standing hunched over first, and then from the hips bending up to a standing position and fully erect. Just almost a montage, a sequence of this happening repeatedly from different points in the process. But slowly zooming in, as it were. Oh, it's not actually a visual experience, it's more just an impression. Closer and closer to its shoulders and above, and always this notion of the head being raised from a downward looking position, either deliberately bowing or just looking at the floor or below it, to looking upright, straight ahead, perhaps even up slightly. For a moment it seemed as though there was a second form. It could be a wall, something also vertical and dark that this form was standing adjacent to, but that disappeared, and almost immediately it, for a moment, seemed as though I heard a very deep bass drum kind of coming from the base of my neck. And then the white noise changed somehow. It seemed like there was perceiving another jet in the center of the two sides that was adjusting its frequency, kind of sliding up and down, almost as if one were dialing through static or tightening the nozzle on a stream of air or vacuum. And then after some time, those two forms returned somewhat, but seemed to be less humanoid now and more the return of those possible letters. The seven somehow bending more into a right angle, and possibly what had been the one next to it with its base at the crosshatch stretching out to meet the base of the seven, and as if the two of them are trying to form a cube, a square, not a cube, but can't. I'm not currently perceiving much of anything that has not already been shown, but rather I've been pondering on it's almost as if things are going backwards actually, pondering on the notion of the duration of time spent in observation, and that to designate a specific amount of time is arbitrary, or at best perhaps even counterproductive, in that it continues to put this impression of our time on an experience. Almost now that box is coming back that can't be formed. Perhaps attempting to create a box when there is no box, or define the limits of something that does not know or does not have limits. There was nothing for quite some time, and now the face is back, but I cannot move it the way that I did. The perspective is fixed beneath it, but very close, looking up into its face from a very sharp angle below. And I had the distinct impression that this is the form that I saw standing and then looking up as it is doing now, and I am now below it. don't know what it is watching, but it is not moving. I get the impression that it will be there forever. This entire time has been with eyes open, but I've just closed them now. And it could be quite fanciful, but it's almost as if I'm looking now into whatever angle that this sentinel character of sorts had been looking towards. Dark purple, sort of sable, ermine colored sky with clouds moving simultaneously in opposite directions, and through it emerging. At first there were almost zooming in towards my view, the images of certain large, almost romanticized portraiture renderings of predatory animals like a leopard, lion, but also falcon, an owl, a wolf. That was strange. Resettling in the chair and sort of saw but didn't at the same time, just had this impression of a very very vivid image of again looking up, but not quite something so large as it was before, and very vivid and all in flesh tones and blues, like one at a time, bodies, and that were hugely muscled. Hard to tell if it were entirely humanoid, since where the head would be was kind of engulfed in these cables and tubes and wires, a helmet of sorts, and as were the ends of its arms. I could not quite see if they were fused or able to be withdrawn, and these appendages, or rather fixtures, all shot up and away into walls and a ceiling that was at once seeming to be irregular and almost hewn from a rock or a deep cavern, but at the same time all the walls and all the surfaces were consisting of a framework, almost like a skeleton without muscles, covered with small green and pale blue spheres, rather electrical, but kind of radiating or very blue end of the ultraviolet spectrum. And seemed to have some very organic component to it, despite what appeared to have been a very technological technological apparatus. For some reason, I have the impression that the creature's head would not have been that of human, but more like a minotaur. I would estimate its size to be about 20 feet tall. But it has been gone for some time now, and this has all been attempting to reconstruct it. Eyes have remained closed throughout this entire process, since first mentioning it. That searing central noise is back. It first sounded as if it were the shaking of steel sheets, and then the lighting of a fuse, and now is pulsing with surprising intensity. Feels like it's been coming closer, but then stopped or retreated. Back, gone. Almost as if it's could be exhales. Almost sounds like growling or barking or some very highly distorted roaring. It's faded somewhat. It feels like dusk. Impression is that there seems to be a resonating or glowing pyramid triangle from bottom center vision, kind of flashing white and black, and then again that kind of dusky purple. Far off in a distance, somewhat covered with fog. I have the feeling that this is the outside of whatever it was that I had been looking up from within. And there was a flash of almost like a Ferris wheel, juxtaposed on top of that, spinning as if to kind of indicate that there were many such inhabitants attached to whatever that infrastructure was.
How was your hour?
That was an hour.
It was an hour.
All right, now we're rolling. This is episode 12? 12? Yeah? Okay. Welcome back to the Ganzfeld Files. Samu has just done an hour-long session with Kevin assisting him. And I wasn't there for it, so Samu, first thoughts, let's say, first impressions. What do you get with that? Start with that.
Well, I guess what I should have really asked before this was, I suppose we did touch on this a bit when the last dive into the psychosphere was done, but is an hour anywhere even close to normal? Does that just track at all with what people typically do?
What people?
What,
No one does
that's
it.
true. All right, good point, good point.
It does.
But how did you
The
settle
majority
on...
of people that have done this are sitting at this table with you.
Oh,
so.
fantastic.
Yeah.
So how did you settle on 15 minutes being the time frame that was kind of the standard move?
That was established a while ago because John kind of went off into the deep end a little too much, and that was he I think he did like a 20 or 25 minute session. So that's when I decided, I was like, all right, it's going to be 15 from now on, so that someone doesn't go so far out that they like lose themselves or something like
Sure.
that. That's what I was kind of afraid of. So we broke it down to 15-minute sessions. And we felt like from then on, it was enough. The last time you were on, Samu, I believe it was episode 8 or 7. One of those. You said that 15 minutes wasn't enough to really absorb what was going on. I think you were trying to you wanted to figure it out. There was a desire to figure out what
get into character, so to speak.
Yeah. And like I'll agree. Like sometimes it's like 5 or 10 minutes. The first 5 or 10 minutes are just trying to figure it out, trying to settle into it. So that's. To answer your question, yeah, that's why we broke it down to 15-minute increments.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Very writ large, I would say that an hour was more effective. I don't know that I would always recommend it. Wouldn't say that it was always like, physically comfortable just to have this bit strapped to your face this entire time. And,
right.
And kind of where one tends to wander internally. I'm sure that if there were more substances involved, perhaps that might accelerate the experience. That might have also made it seem less viable to go for an entire hour. But we did use, and Kevin having been sort of the arbiter of this experience, having, as for those who are listening, taped this in a separate room with Kevin taking some notes and then also lighting some little herbal things.
Mugwort.
Different times. And being more removed from all the trappings of the equipment that we'd be doing the podcast around or with.
Right.
I would do it again, but I would describe hour-long dives as like cookies. They're sometimes food, not something that you want to.
I guess
You had the
let's
snack of the Ganzfeld Files.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
let's scoot on over to Kevin here and ask him what's your first impressions of that. Bring the mic a little closer.
Sure.
Yeah.
I was, for about the first 5 or 6 minutes, I was worried I was going to be sitting there for an hour. And Samu and I just in solemn silence, which I'm sure would have been a lovely time. Either way, he was wearing the stuff or not. It was, for some reason, I was just listening to him. And fantastic vocabulary, by the way.
Nice.
And then about 20 minutes in, I was like, oh, this is actually some very fascinating stuff. I need to start writing all of this down. And it went by very quickly.
Yeah.
Like, I honestly, my worry was, I'm sitting in a room with a guy in a chair who's just going to be talking, and now I have an hour that will feel like 10. But
Yeah.
I looked down and I was like, oh, it's been 20 minutes. Oh, I should start writing all this down.
Right.
And then and it was fascinating. I didn't keep exact pinpoints of moments, but there's very clearly stuff, and like cyclically every 5-ish minutes he would talk for 2 minutes, pause,
Right.
talk for 2 minutes, pause. And it was very vivid imagery that was also cyclical, where it sort of stuff returned, left, returned, and left. It was fascinating to watch for an hour.
Wow. Yeah.
It almost seemed like there were leitmotifs, things that would make their initial presence and then cycle back either in playing forward or playing back in reverse. Much more...
Like the man who constantly was getting up.
Yes, he just was getting up for... He was really... He did a good job. He did a very
I
good
used
job.
the correct
of getting
phrasing on that one.
the man who was erecting himself. It felt, at least compared to last time felt quite sensory and kind of flowing, freeform. This felt much more serialized. There were different movements, different passages or sort of chapters to an experience that I don't think would have been even remotely possible were it undertaken in a shorter time frame. Since, as he mentioned, I couldn't immediately guess, and this is where his timestamps will come in handy, how long it was before I had said anything at all, but it felt like at least 2 or 3 minutes.
Right.
I would say probably closer to 5 to
Was it?
5 to 6 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then as I exited, I also didn't feel as though it had been fully an hour. I told him that I would have guessed it was maybe 36 minutes.
Total session. 36 minutes. That's what you felt.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
And that for what I thought was approximately the first half, kept eyes open on the not as highly dialed up red setting, but since I've been staring at bright red lights for an entire hour, I could be problematic. Thought that was about halfway through, but according to his notes, I was only really the last 20 minutes where eyes were closed, and that's where things got a little stranger.
Wow.
It was
For sure.
Okay.
awesome.
Well, Kevin said it was awesome.
If what he's describing was what he was sawing, there was a part of me that was like so jealous. I was trying to visualize it in my
Jelly
brain
now.
because it sounded so cool.
So, hour-long session, you said, is, like a cookie, a sometimes food. So, hour-long, you would say only do it sometimes.
I mean, unless you really want to go hard and get super mentally ripped, and I guess, it's just considered like the ultra max out session every time. But maybe there's something to be said for some variability, little dip your toes and have a quick little tool around the pond, and then another time do a bit deeper spelunking.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm no expert at this, obviously.
So, do you think that it was obviously different from your 15-minute session back in the other episode? So this was deeper. It was more visceral. It was more intense this time around, or was it the same?
Oh, certainly more intense. And
Yeah.
there were different senses that were sparked too. So previously it felt, like I said, a lot more sensorial, color, and so forth. But there were definite physical cues this time around.
Right.
And then sonically, that was the part that was hardest to describe because I didn't want to speak over it. But that was the part that was most concerning, I guess I would say.
Wow.
So I need
Okay.
to inquire how your white noise program, how static of white noise is that?
So it is a small little AM/FM radio. So what it is it's just tuned to a station that is blank. So it's just picking up static only. So with that, you might get some radio interference. You might get like a radio show or music or something like that. It's not an exact science. I just prefer that one to a white noise app. But doing an hour-long session, a white noise app might be better. But there is a chance that you could have picked up on some radio show or something.
It didn't feel like that, but I guess I'm
No?
sort of jumping the shark.
Oh.
Since that was sort of later on.
I can absolutely say, since it was loud enough in his headphones, there was never any change from the static. It was the static for the hour.
What?
Okay, definitely was not.
Oh, God. Okay.
I know.
I can assure you.
Oh,
You told me.
shit.
I did tell you.
Oh, my
Yeah.
God. Okay. I guess, I'll let Kevin and Samu describe what exactly they saw. So before we get into that, I'll just explain. Samu just did an hour-long session in the Ganzfeld. It was a ping pong ball over his eyes. There was a red light over that, and you were also listening to white noise with noise-canceling headphones that was tuned to a AM/FM radio station that was just static. So yeah, let's get into the meat of this. I'm excited because I wasn't there for it, so I'm excited to hear.
It'll be like us telling you blow by blow a movie that we watched that you will never get to see the same way that we did. So
I didn't even get to see it. I'm actually very jealous. So I unfortunately started taking notes about 20 minutes in. Samu, I would guess around the 15 to 17 minute mark, lifted up his left arm and placed it on the back of the chair. And he just started describing a discomfort in his left shoulder. But then as he raised his arm, and this is almost a direct quote, "What was nothing started to take shape and color. A pulsing floor merged with mass like a broader version of what planted it. It started taking over vision bottom to top before pushing him from sight."
yeah, that was unexpected. The first handful of minutes, again, just sort of getting situated and trying to figure out, all right, what if this is just the red visuals, what if this is just the white noise? But it did seem as though there was sort of a top-line view almost coming down through atmosphere of sorts. Unsure whether it was passing these very large pillars that were, or cords maybe, or trees at some point I described, down towards something. And slowed visual effects. I hate to use this term because it seems like it's so well inculcated into what we've seen with sci-fi and so forth, but almost the various chapters seeming slightly like a planet origin in a sense, or the ways in which something that is nothing then, or like a panspermia event almost, where something receives this charge and then begins to awaken. But maybe this was also too just my eyes becoming more acclimated to that stimulation, since, like I said, for the first 40 minutes or so, eyes stayed open. But there were very vague kind of shapes. And then, like Kevin noted, became very suddenly aware of it's not feeling entirely comfortable, some sort of strain on the left side, and that I'd been almost sort of guided to change a position of sorts. And then after doing that, then almost immediately some of the imagery became a little more clear. This was already part of the chapter-like kind of experiences of what appears to be some non-human form, a possible sea floor or forest floor or a terrestrial floor that this form or shape is focused on, but then also sort of raising or elevating itself from. It seemed halfway between like a tower that had these little geodesic domes that were all sprouting out from around it, combined with something much more seafaring, not necessarily seafaring, aquatic, there we are, that's the word, where these little pods were all being deposited and little seed colonies slowly growing and sprouting as this central, larger kind of towering shape was then wafting itself up a bit like, do you know the magna pinna? Are you familiar with the magna pinna? It's jellyfish. It's pretty great. Big fan. Have been for a long time. Actually wrote a song that was called Magna Pinna, in part. Anyway, it has powerful long tentacles that are like over 30 feet long or something like this, and this wide, almost umbrella-like kind of body that can poof and waft itself up. And it had these very jellyfish-like kind of vibes as it was escaping up out of range of vision. And that was a chapter. And then there was another one where it still seemed like a continuation of this same story, so to speak. There was some slippery sort of tail that was disappearing into a crevice or a crevasse. And that repeating also frequently. Kevin may know around when this point was, if this was pre-post 20 or...
I would say it took place when you first mentioned the tail was pre-20 minutes, and then it came back around the 25-minute mark.
Okay, yeah. And that is where it seemed, as things started to come back or reprise themselves, that it was almost telling a tale in chapters, and then reiterating certain points of saying, all right, you've seen this, now this part makes more sense, remember this, here's a callback, that kind of thing. But it was very fluid too, since some of these images would morph rather from something that looked like it was this tail disappearing into numbers. And this is where it got a
17.
17, whatever that means. But first was trying to figure out, it looked like one number. Was it a 1? Was it a 7? Sort of eventually settled on, I think this is a 7. But then that in turn eventually was transforming or being more revealed to be what appeared to be a side view, almost like an MRI half scan cut laterally of the upper portion of a human or some sort of humanoid form. And that 7 was the upper part of the spinal column, sort of like reaching up to the base of the skull, that kind of thing. And then this is where this human form sort of just standing repeatedly came up to after this burrowing action from the tail, having then lifted off and come back down. Hence this notion of, seems to be implying some sort of weird panspermia event or an origin tale of sorts. But those numbers were still kind of part of the fold. There was this face too, as often seems to crop up in these situations. But that interacted in different ways too, since quite early on. That was one of the first things that I saw, was a face that would turn and then sort of melt. Hard to distinguish, didn't seem like it had any particularly discernible features.
Potentially two faces.
Potentially two, that's right, yes. That had this kind of conjoined element right behind the ears, so there's two faces that would kind of merge into one and then fold apart again. And it almost seemed as though, since at some point I started looking around, that I could look around, and maybe this is perhaps when I was making helm goggle contact, ping pong tact, ping pong ball
tact, yes.
Ping pong tact with Kevin on the other side of the room. And by turning, it was almost as if I were then manipulating the face, sort of looking at it, moving it hither and yon.
Well, you phrased it as if, like, even though you were only moving your head, your hands were still, you described it as almost like your hand was on their chin, sort of moving their head around.
Yeah. Oh, this is when you look directly at Kevin?
Yes, the first time.
Love at first sight.
That's creepy.
It was almost sensual, you know, sort of you're just turning a head back and forth, and there's this very soft lilt of the head and the drape of the neck. It wasn't guarded or angry or anything like that. It was just very, very soft, very supple. Didn't stay that way, though, I guess. He may be able to sort of help prompt my memory as to what happened after that.
So you were talking about holding on to the chin and sort of moving the face around, and then you talked about the twin faces merging together, and the tail and or spinal column was sort of facing the same direction of the initial face.
Right.
And then you went directly to the bipedal figure. That was repeatedly going up and down.
Yeah. It seemed to jump back and forth between almost like a side-scroller video game / Egyptian tapestry, where things happen narratively as you move from left to right. Between that and then jumping into frame, as it were, close-up, and something that's much more 3D. But this bipedal figure constantly standing up and standing up, that was very much in this side view, which seemed, at least based on whatever my interpretation is that was indicating, all right, here's another step in the story, as opposed to grounding me in a specific moment.
And you weren't sure if it was either bowing or looking down.
Good point, yes. Starting in almost kind of a worshipful pose. Something about it seemed to suggest as if it were an actualization, or that it was awakening of sorts, you know, going from something that was that's developing consciousness, I guess, or being able to look out and up instead of just down, or to be aware. So like suggestion of awareness, I guess. Like
a Kundalini awakening kind of a thing?
You're going to have to tell me a little bit more about that.
Okay.
Just do more yoga and you'll know what Kundalini is.
Shucks. I only do accidental yoga.
Reaching over for something.
Yeah.
The stretch feels fantastic. I'm going to hold this for 5 minutes.
I'm going to call this the heron.
I'll break it down to you later. But continuing on our journey here.
Oh, yes. So just after the form that was either bowing or looking down, you started to get the impression of a bass drum to the base of your neck.
Yeah, that was the weird bit. Hence, may I ask? Well, one of several weird bits, but that was the first part where sound really became a factor. So it's almost sort of, here's the end of Act 1. Now we're entering Act 2. Right. And up to this point, the white noise had been very much white noise. It was clearly coming from either earphone, is that the right word? Speaker bit. And then quite suddenly, and again, all circling around this origin point of the base of the spine, base of the neck, there was this kind of sharp report of a bass drum 2 or 3 times, but almost entirely without context. Didn't seem to be connected to any sort of radio broadcast or some sort of cross-frequency contamination that I reported when we first did this last time.
Right.
And then there was more of a centered, different frequency of white noise that was also this band that would be changing, and that was very much centered. It was not part of either left or right. It was very much in the center, and that would range up and down. At first, I didn't know quite how to describe it, but yeah, sort of the dialing of a frequency. You may have some verbiage there.
I tried to write this as well as I could as I was following along. White noise changed perceiving another jet on
Jets,
the two
yes,
sides,
like a jet.
going up and down like a stream of air or a vacuum.
As if you have the vacuum cleaner and you're manipulating how much air is coming out at a given time, that kind of thing. Managing the flow, as it were. And it felt like a very vertical experience, whereas the left and right noises felt more red. This felt more like white and vertical, much more sort of rocket taking off kind of thing.
Right.
There were no other drums at any point throughout this. It was just that. But definitely some sound points came back that were, I don't know if there's any way that they'll come through on the recording. I really hope they do.
Yeah.
But those came later.
There's so much shit to unpack here. This is crazy. Oh man, and
We haven't gotten.
we haven't got to the crazy
We'll get
part
there.
yet. Oh my god.
Just wait for the square. That is not a square.
The unsquare.
Square. That's not a square.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Okay.
It's a horse, but it wasn't a horse.
No, there we go.
It's definitely not a pipe either.
Oh, okay. When is a horse not a horse?
That's a good question, of course.
Was it a pipe? It's not a pipe.
What did I do next, Kevin?
Funny you asked that. So you said the forms returned, but they were less human.
Yeah.
And then it was the return of the numbers. 7 bending into an angle, potentially 1 bending to meet the base, trying to form a cube, you said, but
Right.
you could not.
Yes. Okay. So the square that was not a square. And this is almost where I thought it was over, actually. Or at least that I was done with it, because this is something that comes up shortly. But so numbers came back, sort of back and forth between the spine bit and the tail bit and the 7 bit. But then, as I'd mentioned, there was that 7/human presence, and then to its left, almost an antecedent, there were flashes of this other one that was much more wall-like or static. And then the two of them started to interact of sorts and seemed like it was a 17, maybe, possibly. But then, if you think of the one that has the horizontal lower beam, right? If you draw one, yes, that was slowly kind of stretching right, and then the top of the 7 was slowly stretching left, so that it was working to create a square. But the edges kept meeting and then sort of pushing apart and then dissipating. It did remind me a little bit of a grilled cheese sandwich that you cut triangular, but then it melted. So no sandwich for you. That was kind of the impression I got, and trying to figure out, what is this? And that was sort of where then after that it disappeared. I don't know if that was precipitated by more weird white jets, but then there was nothing for a while. I might have been quiet for,
I would honestly say 4 to 5 minutes.
I was going to guess 7 hours, but there was nothing, just not seeing anything, not feeling anything, but was very specifically provoked to be thinking about some things. And at this point I'm thinking, all right, how long have I been in here? These goggles are a little uncomfortable, make that sort of uncomfortable after this much time.
Can I give you the rough quote?
Please, yes.
Not currently perceiving new things, pondering on the notion of duration of time spent in observation. To designate specific amount of time is arbitrary and counterproductive. Gives impression that our time is an experience.
Mm-hmm.
I love your scientific language you use. Yeah.
But the thought that actually occurred to me in this, I don't know, vacuum was, I have no idea how long I've been in here. And looking at these numbers that are trying to form a box, it isn't a box. why
Attempting to make a box that can't box.
can't box.
Box that can't
Yeah,
box.
it was pretty bad at boxing.
Box that won't box.
And thus I was thinking, why am I trying to box? You know, why are we trying to box? If we were attempting,
I don't know.
Kevin isn't sure why.
that's a much better joke if you know what Kevin does. It seems that if we're attempting to pierce the veil, as it were, and to step outside of time, space, and human experience, why say, all right, you're going down for 15 minutes. You are almost seems like you're setting yourself up to fail. So this is somewhat what I was thinking about what these numbers were,
Right,
and that if you're going to go in, and then let whatever is going to happen, happen. And if the story's done, then there's nothing more for you that session. Maybe it's time for you to go away,
That makes
or maybe you
sense.
just have to wait for something to happen. Hence, at that point, in the middle of whatever this intermission was, which I didn't realize was intermission at the time, I almost said, all right, I think that's all. I think I'm done. I think there's nothing more for me to see here. I'm just kind of filling some dead space. And that was it. But then it wasn't. So that was also in itself kind of a I don't want to say lesson, but indicator that not binding yourself to a specific time frame or limit is good, but still had the impression that you can get more out of it when you do take a longer period of time. Just don't expect it to be the same tenor or level of energy or general goodness vibes that you were maybe previously experiencing,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Not to, again, shackle us to box, but around what time frame, timestamp was this?
I would say that this was probably approaching the 40-minute mark.
You need to hire a stenographer. My
Yeah,
God.
maybe. Well, again, you recorded it, hopefully, so.
Yeah, it's recorded. So,
Right. That was probably around the time, I think, where, having had my eyes open for the duration, decided to, oh, no, that's not right.
No.
That's the Sentinel character.
Yes, face returns but cannot be moved any longer.
That's right. Yeah, that was interesting. Since previously I felt as though I'd had, I don't know, sort of an influence, I guess, or could try to, could understand some of why what I was seeing was maybe just, all right, blood vessels doing these things, or if you look up, it causes the mask to sit this way, and everything was still very suffused with red and kind of vague black outlines. But it was curious that after this period of time, kind of waiting, and just about bailing, that the face came back. But it didn't have that same sort of 3D handling. Like when you take a 3D picture, well, I don't do this, but when people take 3D pictures and they move their phone around so that as you look at it and you scroll, you can see it sort of move along this almost curvature of the photo.
yeah.
That's what it used to be. But now, as I was trying to do the same thing, like, oh, welcome back, friendo, didn't work. And it felt as though I were in a much more static position now, below it, sort of as if it were maybe about, well, this thing could have been huge. It seemed like it was, but was in very close proximity to its upper sternum, looking up at it, and as it was looking out. And that, I think, is where the quote had the impression that it may be her for forever. Was gazing off into something.
And that's when you closed your eyes for the first time.
Ever in my life. Yes, and that's definitely where things went a little more off the rails. I don't know why I did. I think hadn't done it yet, and I knew that I'd done that last time. But also had the impression that now that this, I don't know, the term Sentinel comes to mind, or I was also thinking of the Colossus of Rhodes, some sort of large guardian that people look up at and see it looking out on something else, and might wonder, what is it looking at, you know? And that at that point,
So sick.
took let's see what happens. And at that point, closed my eyes, and then it seems to have been sort of sucked into maybe what it was looking at. Total color palette shift, and became much more vivid imagery with much firmer outlines. Certainly not as episodic, a little more fractured. Do you have any early comments on this?
I cannot wait to read this. So he's looking at the perspective of the person, and a dark purple sky that's moving, and zooming in from the sky is images of large, romanticized portraits of predatory animals.
Yep.
Notably, a leopard, a lion, a falcon, an owl, and a wolf.
Mm-hmm. Just zooming in from this sort of like channel towards the camera lens, so to speak, not moving, but very distinctly kind of menacing, unpleasant, and all with these heavy dark lines surrounded by this kind of purple and very dusky, dark backdrop.
All right. I think we're going to take a break right there. I think because you're giving listeners a whiplash with all of your with all the things.
You thought it was
I'm getting
calm,
whiplash.
but it wasn't.
It's insane. So we're going to take a little break, and when we come back, we're going to have more tales from Samu's trip.
The pyramid.
Ready.
Okay, and we're back. Where did we leave off on, Kevin?
Anchor. So
Welcome back. Thank you, Anchor. Yeah.
So Samu had recently closed his eyes, and the skies parted, and the sort of leopard, lion, falcon, owl, wolf started the images of started sort of coming through whatever the sky, the purple sky was.
Yes, zooming in sequence, and I was trying to, almost in real time, figure out what this meant.
I believe you said that.
That's true. I think I did.
Yes, you did.
And my impression was that it was a general indication of different kinds of predators, perhaps even apex predators, that if in this construct of this colossus or sentinel large guardian thing entity might potentially be looking out for such like. And not that it would explicitly be an owl that was flying in from outer space to
because that's what I was visioning.
Do battle.
That's why I got so stoked.
If maybe it were, then fantastic. But if anything, it felt as though it was more trying to indicate. My guess is that here's something relatable, right? What I might understand a threat to look like, if that makes sense. But it didn't feel personally threatening. It's more of kind of observing. Just observing. I did want to dial back a bit too to touch on, since last time the only other changes of experience would have been partway through was given a Hammerheart beer, which aside from just being delicious, did sort of change the color spectrum a bit. But in this situation, there were two different herbs that were lit, right? And
yes,
Kevin was the master of those.
Was the
mugwort?
Mugwort,
Yep.
yes. So
that's the one, yeah.
I would say around roughly the 30-minute mark, not long after you sort of dropped your arm down, and it was around the time where the face appeared and you felt like you were able to manipulate the face itself and sort of move it around, and the realization that it could potentially be two faces merged together was around when the mugwort came in.
All right. And I should also note that after dropping the arm back down, it didn't feel like it had felt before. It was fine. So, I don't know, it seemed that was some just kind of indicator. And I still think that there's a lot to be said for this project and where it exists in space, just in terms of physical space, how you might be sitting, where your hands are, just if you are trying to particularly align yourself within yourself, or if there's something else outside of yourself that you're trying to align with, regardless of whether, again, I'm not fully myself invested into whether that exists, but in terms of how you feel that it exists and how that then positions you to be more open-minded. I still want to do one of these on the equinox, directly adjacent to a large body of water at, I don't know, midnight or something. That seems like it'd be particularly aligned for channel exchange. If that
Ganzfeld Files
sense.
live on the Equinox outside of
Live
Lake
on the
Michigan.
Equinox.
Yes.
When is the equinox?
It's the same time pretty much every year. And there's one in September. There's one in March, usually right on the 21st. And then, of course, the solstice. Solstices, those might also do it.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
Solstice dates?
No, the 21st night of September.
Oh, goodness, yes. Watching that one.
Quick with the jokes there.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Kevin's got it.
But
It's the
anyway,
Oktoberfest.
It's from Metropolitan. Anyway, so those are two things that also were kind of on my mind. And then there was another herb that came up at some point, too, that he will be able to speak to. But,
there was sage and mugwort
Right.
was in there. So I told Kevin mugwort is for fun, sage is for evil. You know?
so evil in the
good
sense
times.
of what? How do you mean?
Well, if there was like an entity or a spirit that is like doing something to you, getting in your space, getting too close to you, doing something that makes you uncomfortable, that's when you would bust out sage, and then it would back off.
So
I was not doing that calculation.
Whoops. Okay, I should explain a little bit further.
Well, that was the thing. It did not seem like there were moments of where I presumed just from being in the room with him, maybe like discomfort or like a weird interaction, but it never seemed to be something that would like take you out of it or really push you away from what was happening. So there was never a moment where I felt like, all right, time for sage.
Sure. I don't remember exactly when this landed, but the end of the experience was distinctly more vivid.
It was around when you closed your eyes. So it was nearing that final fourth of the...
Okay.
Yeah.
Which I felt was almost as long as the entire first half, but evidently was only 15 minutes or so. And I believe it was after the sage that actually more of the negative, so to speak, elements started cropping up.
Oh, so after the sage. So he saged and then they came back. Once the sage
It wasn't even coming back. These were totally new,
Yes. Yes.
new bits. So having observed this, this sort of parade of predators, those then eventually went away, and things were kind of vague for a spell. But then I'd had this very, very brief, just internal flash. It wasn't even what it felt like I was looking at, just sort of an image that appeared, slightly dynamic, and that it felt like it was a glimpse of something over the course of a few seconds, not just a picture of something. But it happened sort of out of nowhere, instead of this chapter-like procession from piece to piece that I had previously been experiencing, and was much more clearly delineated, much more vivid, much more grounded, I guess. Instead of seeing vague forms that looked like maybe this, it was like searing imagery that I could, if I were particularly adept at drawing, could draw and know exactly what it looked like. And that didn't have a lot of context, but then maybe it did, because I'm still trying to piece it together. But he might have some wording to sort of frame this with, since I don't really even know where to begin to attack it.
Yeah, we'll continue on with Kevin's notes in a second, but real quick, I just want to ask you a question. Does any of this, did any of it make sense? Or was it all just a big enigma? Was it a big puzzle?
I could create a narrative around this if I were to think about what is the so-called message here.
Right.
It seemed like there were distinctly two sides to this story. One with eyes open, one with eyes closed, one more red shift, one more purple/blue shift, one more responsive, dyadic, engaged, not necessarily humanist, but somehow organic, origin, ancient, intimate, if I haven't used the word already. And the other side of this was much more convoluted, antagonistic, brutal even, threatening, conflict-oriented or things working against. I described previously I was watching things happen from left to right, and this time it was much more like zooming straight in. Sonically was like, very aggressive.
Weird.
The
And that's,
last fourth, you definitely had a lot more to say about what it was auditorially.
Yeah. I don't know whether this is in your Kevin went to get a beer gap, but did you at any point witness, since I think most of my movements were very deliberate, but there were certain points where they were not. Did you witness anything that seemed like just sort of a start or a shock or an unexpected?
There is quite literally in my notes after these sort of predatory animals appeared, I made note of you resettling in your chair, sort of like making like an aggressive shift and then sort of settling back in was sort of the next thing that was of note to me to put down.
Yeah, that.
And then after that, I got the beer. But
Oh, okay. I think
no, I'm kidding. I got notes for the next few minutes as you explained what was going on. But yeah, I made complete note of what seemed to me you resettling in the chair, but it may have been a jolt to you being in that moment.
Indeed, yeah. Particularly at least the first time. So visually, this very vivid piece, which I'll touch on in a moment, came up, and then it went away, and then there was this gap in visual elements, but then sound came back, and that kind of resparking of that central, more white, vertical kind of thunderous sort of tone. And well, I guess I should describe the image since it plays into this. I believe that the sound came after this. Yes, it did. The image did look like something out of some bizarre dystopian future world, and was decidedly not friendly. I wouldn't say observed at this moment. This was kind of just a flash look at something, but it was of a body, a bipedal body, much as the others were, but both the ends of its arms and its head were ensnared, obscured, encased in this almost pasta-like kind of web of cables and snares and tentacles and tubes and sensors. It was very webbing. It was very, very technological, but at the same time, the place in which this was happening, this vast kind of cavernous expanse, looked as though it was almost hewn out of rock, subterranean, but at the same time, all the walls were covered with these tiny little, almost microbial balls of green and orange, I think they were, looked...
Green and blue.
Blue, thank you.
Would this be like biomechanical? Is this like a mix between...
Something in that vein is the impression that I was getting.
Right.
And
do you mind if I jump in with the notes?
Please, yeah, you've got the details.
So it was the impression of a vivid image of flesh tones and bodies, multiple, that were muscled and hard to tell entirely if humanoid. Their head was engulfed in cables, tubes, or potentially wired helmets, and arms fused that could not be moved.
Yeah, as if there were these apparati, hippopotamuses that were connected to the roofs or the walls of this chamber, and it was almost as if both arms and the head had been plugged into these modules, and it was a contested relationship. It's not like they were, say, for instance, in the Ganzfeld, where you tape some little chopped up bits on your face and then sit quietly in a chair. It was almost sort of combating it, and very like hyper muscled, just veins bulging, very almost gladiatorial. It seemed like it was a large presence too, not as large as what that sort of sentinel colossus had been, but perhaps about 20 feet tall, something. And also had this kind of impression that even though not being able to see the head of this thing, it seemed perhaps that I had some just knowing that it was something like a minotaur or some not entirely purely human kind of creature. Certainly from its physicality was not. And that image, was extraordinarily vivid and unlike anything. And I also, at the same time, didn't really feel like I saw it. It felt as though it was somehow just a flash that existed somewhere between the optic nerve and
this was post-Sage. This was
Post-Sage.
not long after Sage.
Yeah.
These beings that were connected to these mechanical devices, did you get the sense that these beings were... It was of their own choice?
No, it's like contested is what I'd say.
It was,
yeah.
okay, yeah.
It was
they were
an
forced to be in there.
unhappy situation. Or even if they were of this, didn't feel like it was an enslavement situation, but more if they were of this landscape, that it was still a very contentious kind of gauntlet to deal with.
Like they were forced into this space and then hooked up these machines against their
Or even
will.
if they chose to do it, it was still a very unpleasant experience.
Okay.
I didn't quite get the sense that there didn't seem to be any taskmasters around. There was nobody but these bodies, and it almost, again, felt like it was something that was fated or that they were obliged to do or knew that needed to happen or was part of the process by which they did what they did. There definitely seemed to be a connection between these bodies and that parade of those predators that was flashing towards whatever that sentinel presence was.
Oh.
Was this a type of hibernation, or were they operating something?
Active, operating unsure, but then I think in the timeline of where this goes, and I could be corrected here if I'm inaccurate, when that vanished, there was a period of silence, because this is where, well, I was silent, but this is where some of the particularly unpleasant noise bits were showing up.
Oh, this is fantastic because
Okay.
after the muscles covered in green pale kind of blue sears, next Kevin goes for a beer. What happened there?
When you
No.
walked away,
No, but honestly, actually, it turns out that was perfect timing because it literally is what you framed. I went to grab a beer and then I came back and those noises happened.
So they happened as you were returning?
When I returned and I sat back down, there was sort of, as you phrased it, a searing central noise, intense, getting closer but stopped and then potentially retreated.
Yeah, okay. So this is why I asked at the very beginning about what app is this for your white noise? Because it was very clearly not white noise. It was these aggressive, sharp stabs of sound that were... I think I described it as like Foley effects when you'll shake a sheet of aluminum to create thunder. Have you seen that before?
yeah, I've seen that. Yeah,
That or heavily distorted, growling or shouting.
Highly distorted roaring.
Roaring, yeah. It could have been the combination of all those preceding creatures that sounded a bit like a lion or a bit like the screech of an owl or potentially just the screaming of a human. And
The predators come back.
it was very specific, repeated at intervals, not intervals like it would just be a pulse of some little, Cessna plane flying overhead or something like that. It was like jarring and very abrupt. And that's like there were just physical recoil moments and total full body tingles. And it would continue kind of in the background, morphing from these more bestial to more human to more mechanical kinds of sounds. And this was largely without any sort of visual element. That had passed, but it seemed like it was very much connected to those previous two experiences. And haven't experienced, I've only done this twice, but that was the most startling. This prior image did look like a techno hellscape from the year 4037. It was really terrible. But
I was just envisioning like the Matrix when they find out that they were all plugged into the machines in those pods.
It is a bit like that, but mix that with, I don't know, if they weren't technobots, but rather like sentient space spiders or something that were all of a different kind of trajectory. And then,
Of course.
and then the noises, that was when there was no particular visual element, and it felt very directed, very targeted, going from audible to like imminent. And John in the past, and you have both asked about, does this feel like it's something that's trying to say go away, or that it's being aggressive or raising its hackles? And at one point, I think I said something like, it sounds almost like the aggravated exhalations of some like massive predatory cat. And
like a warning exhalation?
it definitely had that vibe. Yeah, just
Ooh.
very aggressive, just bristling and
like a snort, like
feral, just feral. Yeah, that was pretty wild. I didn't expect to dive into that sort of thing.
James
Holy
the
shit.
lion
the lion.
from when you and I most recently did it.
Oh yeah, I had a tiger.
Space tiger.
I experienced it. No, it was a lion. It was a lion or a tiger. I think it was a lion. Yeah.
But was it also a
last
bear?
time. Definitely wasn't a bear. John saw a bear.
It was a
but
lion, a witch, and a wardrobe.
That's right. Yes, we were almost in a wardrobe there.
I did see a lion. I saw this spinal column in the last session that me and Kevin did.
Huh.
He mentioned it, and then there was the pyramid. I saw a black obsidian like pyramid. I was looking over it, and this pyramid, I got the sense that it was this meeting place.
Okay.
So-
I don't think you've told me about the pyramid. I'm hoping you haven't.
No, I don't think I did.
No,
I don't think I told you about that.
Because and this actually lines up really well that this come up because the sound faded after a few minutes. You were actually hearing these sort of pulsating roars, I guess we'll call them, and then it kind of went to dusk.
Yeah.
And then I have it in all caps with an exclamation point, pyramid. Because you just drop like, I see like a triangle or a pyramid or something, and I just went, holy shit!
Yes.
Yeah,
It did. So after that faded, there was a brief intermission of, I guess, I'm sort of backing off, where I'm out of that space and into a different field of vision, I suppose. And there was this pulsing, still in that purple, black, white mix of a small triangle, which then waxed and grew and continued to sort of burnish itself until it looked as though, again, sort of having zoomed out from being underground, that it was indeed a pyramid-like structure, which almost immediately flashed with this, as I described it, almost a Ferris wheel,
Yes.
with these different forms that were each in one, affixed to one part of it, almost as if to suggest that there are these many different entities who are buried or locked within the undergirding spectrum of this pyramid place, doing science stuff. I don't know. War stuff. I don't know. Techno babble stuff.
And that's unfortunately where the hour went.
Just about.
But
Yeah.
what I was getting excited about, because he mentioned the pyramid, and then he referenced afterwards, like he's finally feeling like he's outside of the pyramid, as if he had been in the pyramid. And
Yeah.
after James's and I's last session, I just started freaking out about he was in the pyramid.
yeah.
He was in the pyramid.
Yeah, I never went in the pyramid. I was outside the pyramid.
I had felt like it was inside the pyramid. It was definitely a place where things were connected. It didn't look like there was a council or any sort of, I don't know, Congress. It was much more of, if there were connectivity, it was because like their hands and their heads were fused into this biomechanical overlord thing that maybe was pyramid shaped. Who knows? But it did look very much as though, or it felt very much as though I had been shot out of or barked out of or roared away from whatever that interior space was, and was thus observing it from the outside. And one thing I didn't say, because I didn't really get a particularly clear enough sense of this, but kind of flashing between these earlier parts, right around that kind of carousel or Ferris wheel, there did seem to appear two other faces. One of which was itself somewhat triangular, but this is before the pyramid, and very shadowed, dusky, kind of hooded. It seemed to be somewhat in the trope of the old wizard man with the beard and the scowling face and the eyes, sort of dark sorcerer elements. But that could have just been kind of tricks of whatever the segue was that I was getting to. The next one, though, that was so brief that I didn't really even have time to comment on it. But the pyramid, and the Ferris wheel all sort of snap together. And this was of a woman's face that was painted white with black sort of undulating and stripes down her eyes, with this tied up sort of majestic coif of black hair, and black lips, and no perceivable iris or pupils, and was
So like a tribal paint kind of.
It felt a little less. I don't know. Well, we didn't even talk about the river and the dried up river, and then the waterbed that didn't turn. Yeah, so that, I guess we missed that entire.
I feel like that was early on.
It
too.
was early.
I do
It
not
was
have many notes on that, unfortunately.
It was
yes.
early. Fortunately, this was all recorded, so
Yeah.
I can just go listen back to
Yeah.
the part. But it felt almost as if it were. Actually, now that I think about it, yep. So at one point early on, this is when, in the more positive red left to right kind of piece, at one point there was this look down through a window towards what it was like this massive roaring river, almost an Amazonian kind of energy that was still very vital and positive. It didn't feel as though it were threatening. But when that left, it seemed that there was a dried up riverbed, that there was where this river had been, but totally vacant. And still some of the, if you look down at a dried delta riverbed and you see the wending of the rivers, or where it was, it looks almost snake-like. That was what it looked like, just painted from just inside either temple, down across the eyes, over the cheekbones, down to either side of the, just interior of the jaw. But that was, again, like half of a second to a flash. But it was, again, extraordinarily vivid, and was indeed very much in the same vein, almost exactly like what those dried up riverbeds had looked like. I probably am missing some things.
Is there anything else in the notes there, Ken?
Let's see.
That you missed?
I mean, we went kind of piece by piece. Like, the only thing that we may have touched on when we talked in the first half, and I may be misremembering, was sort of like the large figure that was ever present. It was a tail, but it became a vertebrae, was sort of the thing.
Yeah, that is one point that I will miss too. So much as there was this, that's interesting. So much as there was this notion of, towards the end, observing the sentinel and then closing eyes and seeing through the sentinel's eyes. Earlier on, if this was sort of the version 1.0 sentinel that I was able to manipulate with the sort of hand on the chin, there also at some point felt from the right side this press, like a hand that was almost caressing the side of my face, which was almost kind of bouncing back and forth at the times that I would have been seeing that face. So this inside-outside experience, I suppose, was happening more or less from the very start.
And you said early on that it felt like there was something there influencing where you were looking.
Yes.
Yeah.
So something it's letting you look at certain things, but not other things.
No, not that. I know we touched on that theme before about this is veiled, this is not veiled. This was more of just to have a gander over this direction, kind of a bit of a nudge. Not so much of don't look at this over here, but rather, all right, there's a lot happening, or there's not a lot happening where you are if you look over here.
Sort of how you took its chin.
Exactly.
It may have taken your chin.
Right.
And guided it.
Or maybe I took my own chin.
Samu was looking at Samu.
Crazy. Oh my God. I mean, when you were first describing this at the beginning of the episode, I think a thought popped in my head. It was like maybe something give you like a zip file, you know, and said, here you go. And then you sort of unpacked it, all that stuff. And it kind of felt almost like Voyager. You know how we had this information that we put on Voyager and the golden plate and the, you know, all that stuff. It just basically explains what humans are, where we are in the universe, and what we look like. That kind of thing was all just into this, you know, little bit of information. We sent that out there, so that's what it sounded like to me. But I don't know. I wasn't there. I wasn't in the chair.
It does sort of make sense. Yeah, it does sound a little bit like that. I didn't want to jump into that too much because, in a sense, that does kind of feel cliched. But at the same time, if you're going to make overtures to something else, you might want to start with something that everybody knows, which is kind of the definition of cliche, I guess. The odd part, since if I had bailed after the first part of the box, the camp box, I would have thought, all right, well, that was fun. But particularly the other part, that was a completely different, unexpected, and jarring, and not through the channels that I'd previously experienced too. It didn't feel like it was coming organically from white noise or through eyes. It was just sort of something that was hammer crack pop up and then disappear, and these fractured flashes. But those, again, were much, much more vivid. The other parts, I'm sure, will fade before long, but those latter images, it's harder to imagine those floating away anytime soon.
Wow. Okay, that's everything that we covered there, Kev?
I guess we'll have to listen back and find out, but I doubt it.
We will, before we go back to Kevin, I will have the full recording on this episode, so everybody listening will be able to listen to Samu's session that he did. So yeah, back to Kevin. Back to you.
Thanks. No, I believe we mostly touched on everything that I was at least able to get notes on. It was, for this being the first time, it was an hour just kind of sitting there and observing and taking notes and taking it all in. Mm. Now that I'm thinking back on it, it didn't feel like an hour to me either.
No? Did it feel like 37 minutes?
It was... I'm really trying to put a timestamp in my brain. I don't know if I can put a timestamp in, but it felt like time was moving much quicker. Mm-hmm. Or it even for me, just only being a person observing and taking notes, it just sort of felt like, wow, this sort of breezed through very quickly. There's a lot of fascinating things happening, and there's a lot of long pauses, but also, have I been here for only 30 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like the only thing that made me realize that time was changing was a clock, which is how life works, but it sort of like felt like innately in that moment, damn, this is weirdly, time is not the same while he's doing this as it was sitting here recording this.
Yeah.
Would you want to do an hour yourself?
Now, yes.
Yeah, now that it's
Pioneer.
It's cool, dude. Yeah.
Now that the maiden voyage
Yes.
has been successfully completed.
I'm a little scared now to do an hour, so yeah, I'll do an hour.
If the last 15 minutes end up the same way they did for me, then it's different terrain.
Yeah, I feel like...
Got to close your eyes to see.
Close your eyes to see.
Yeah.
That's right. I think actually we sort of touched on that
Close your
last
eyes
time we
to
did this
see.
too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's a callback. Good callback.
Yeah. I think it also helps for me if I see something that I don't like, or I see something scary that frightens me. I just stay the course and I just explain in detail what it is, and that can kind of ground me to earth, and that helps me from being like, nope, and then just closing the session and be like, I don't want to do it.
Are you able to describe it as it's happening? Since I find that as soon as I start saying anything, that much of what is happening retreats.
That does happen to me, because something will be like in the periphery over here, and then I'm like, if it stays in the periphery, I'm like, okay, I kind of see this shape. That's why I describe it in small pieces. I'm like, it's large, it's tall, it's round, it's red, it's this. So I try to use these describer words, and other time I'm able to, do that live. Other times it's like a flash, and then I have to. It comes in, and then it's gone, and I'm like, okay, well, that was a lion, I think, and it
It's
had
more
this
quantum
kind of
that by
thing.
observing it,
Yeah.
obliges it to be something other than what it initially was. Or Schrodinger's cat. Don't kill the cat.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like
Schrodinger
sometimes
never
it's
had
like
a cat.
What did he have, and why was it a cat instead of something
I
else?
don't know. It was in a box.
There's a box
That's
that
true.
is
You
in the
did
box.
not. You did not look at Schrodinger's cat.
When there's a box, not
So
a box.
you were not responsible for killing it. At least there's that.
Yeah. But yeah, sometimes it's a blip, and then I have to unpack the blip.
Yes. Deblip it. Unblip it.
Unblip it.
Huh.
Yeah.
Don't box it.
Don't
Right,
box it. Yeah, I kind of I was getting this sense of
But
like,
can
is
it
the
box?
It
Is the
no,
box
don't.
Can't
like-
box. The box can't box.
My
You're-
impression is that the big muscled, whatever sort of ensuckled, is that a word? Ensuckled, yeah. Their appendages were ensuckled by something. They could definitely box.
I think probably now is a good time to end. There was a lot that we just covered there. Of course, Samu was in there for an hour. Samu, I would like to get you back on another episode just to do an analysis of this.
2 hours.
He wants to go for 2 hours.
Summer's going to go in for 24 hours.
But yeah, I would like. I have to listen to the recording as well, and then I'm gonna take some notes, and then I'm gonna ask you like specifically what the heck this was. So, but also John has been cooking for about 30 minutes now.
Ooh,
He's been in the Ganzfeld, so
little ripe.
we gotta go pull him.
Did we
out.
preset the oven, or has he just been cooking straight up?
I
he's
think
just
he's
been
on
cooking.
max fire mode.
Yeah, and I
just
haven't.
broiler on, complete rage.
He's been quiet for the past 10 minutes, so
My
I'm
guess
kind of
is that
nervous.
he's probably naked asleep on the floor, perhaps.
Well, so are the three of us. That doesn't.
We're all naked here. But yeah, I think that's where we'll end. And then when we come back, I'm just gonna make it a new episode, and we'll do a breakdown with John. By that time, our sandwiches will probably be here. So yeah, that'll be it. Thank you again, Kevin, for coming on the show.
Shout out Adventure Champs.
Adventure Champ. Yeah, when Kevin is not exploring the universe, he is playing D&D on Adventure Champs. Check out his podcast on
All streaming platforms.
all streaming platforms where we get your podcast. Check out Adventure Champs. Samu, thank you again for coming on the show.
Happy to do it.
Yep. All right, let's go pull John out of the universe.
Anchor.
Thank you, Anchor. All right.